If not, now if we'll move on to the conduct of business.
Okay, conduct of business, item A. Receive recommendations from the Parks and Recreation Commission regarding leashed dogs in city parks and provide direction to staff.
Thank you, Vicki. Director Burns.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. By way of background, the city's municipal code prohibits all but service animals, whether on or off leash, from entering all city parks except the dog run at Commodore Park. In fall 2016, the City Council expressed interest in receiving input from the Parks and Recreation Commission on how to address the frequent presence of dogs, both on and off leash in city parks. In early 2017, the Commission recommended to the City Council that on-leash dogs be allowed in city parks. Following on the Commission's recommendation, the City Council authorized a 6-month pilot program from April 24 through October 23rd of 2017. The pilot program allowed on-leash dogs on paved pathways in City Park and Grundy Park. No other parks were included in the pilot program. Signs announcing the pilot program and waste bag kiosks were installed at the entrances of the 2 parks. The pilot program was announced on the city's website, Nextdoor, the Community Services Department e-newsletter, San Bruno Cable, Police Department social media sites, and email blasts to recreation program patrons. At the conclusion of the pilot program, staff presented the results to the City Council. In summary, the Police Department concluded the pilot program did not create a public safety concern or significant public nuisance, and determined that responding to off-leash dog violations on a complaint basis would not likely create a significant additional burden on Police Department resources. Additionally, the Parks Maintenance Division did not experience an impact as a result of the pilot program and saw no difference in the number of dogs or an increase in dog feces in city parks, including City Park and Grundy Park. During the pilot program, the Community Services Department was contacted about the pilot program on 9 occasions. On 4 occasions, the citizens expressed support for the pilot program, and on 5 occasions, the citizens did not want dogs either on or off leash in any city park. The City Council requested the results of the pilot program be shared with the Parks and Recreation Commission and requested the Commission's input on which parks, if any, dogs should be allowed and the rules regulating their activity. At its special meeting on December 6, 2017, the Parks and Recreation Commission received a report on the results of the pilot program. The Commission expressed concern about allowing dogs in the city's smaller parks and tot lots, where there is inadequate space to accommodate both children playing and dogs. By unanimous vote of the commissioners present, the Commission recommended that dogs be allowed in 14 of the 20 city parks. Those parks with small footprints or designated as tot lots were not included in the recommended parks. Specifically, the Commission recommends the following to the City Council. Dogs be allowed in 14 of the 20 parks as follows: Bayshore Circle, Bel Air Park / Lions Field, Buckeye, City Park, Commodore, Earl Glenview, Fleetwood, Florida Avenue, Forest Lane, Grundy, Monteverde, Pacific Heights, 7th Avenue, and 7th and Walnut Parks. Further, the Commission recommends that dogs be prohibited from 6 city parks as follows: the Catalpa Tot Lot, Fleetwood Tot Lot, Herman Park, Lomita Park, Ponderosa Park, and Posey Park. Owners and handlers have no more than 3 dogs leashed under their control. Owners and handlers should be required to keep the dogs on a non-retractable leash at all times with a maximum length of 6 feet. Owners and handlers should be responsible for promptly cleaning up after dogs. Dogs should be restricted from entering the surfaces surrounding play equipment and synthetic turf areas. And dogs should be permitted throughout the recommended parks and not be required to remain on park pathways. The implementation cost associated with the Park and Recreation Commission's recommendation would be approximately $8,300, with funding available in the Parks Maintenance Division operating budget. In the event the City Council wishes to modify the municipal code currently prohibiting dogs in all city parks, staff would return at an upcoming meeting of the City Council with a draft ordinance for introduction. I would be happy to respond to any questions, as would the Parks and Recreation Commission Chairman Mike Palmer and Parks Field Supervisor Dan Venezia, who are both here this evening.
And before we open that up, and Raina, before you come up, just for point of information clarification, Michael Salazar and Laura Davis were on the Park and Recreation Commission when this item was discussed, and they did take a vote on it. And so does that change anything as far as us going forward on this topic?
No, it does not. There's no financial or other conflict of interest. They can participate.
Okay, and that's just for disclosure for everybody involved. Absolutely. Why don't we go ahead, and if there are any questions to staff, or can I open it up to Raina real quick? Raina, you waited all night.
Good evening and Happy New Year to everyone. And I'm speaking for Bowie and Bruno. Thank you so much for for giving the opportunity for San Bruno to be pet friendly. We really, really appreciate it. It hasn't been that many complaints. And San Bruno residents are actually learning how to clean after their four-legged kids. We never would call them dogs. Four-legged kids. So I want to thank you for that opportunity, and I would like to know when the ordinance will be amended to allow dogs in the park. Another request that I will have is like myself and the Bruno and Bowie's dog walker have suggested if we can ask for a trash bin put at the end of where the park ends, on Saint Philippe, because if they pick up after their pets, there's no a place where to put it, so they leave it there, and we always pick it up to put it in our trash because it's hard to go back to a trash bin where it's located. Do you know what I'm talking about? So if we can actually have one there, like as they're exiting the park, it'll be a great idea. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Any questions from council to Director Burns or Chairman Palmer from the commission? No? So this is obviously, we're here to receive the recommendations, which we are from the Park and Recreation Commission, and provide direction to staff, which if we direct them, they can bring back an ordinance based on the findings of the staff report. What's the council's pleasure?
Through the chair.
Yes, Irene.
Well, I have a question first. On number 2, Carrie, it says Posey Park. What is that now? Is there really a Posey Park anymore?
Mike.
I apologize. There is Posey Park, where the Centennial Mosaic mural is at the base of the grade separation train station. So that's where Posey Park is, and it's all concrete, but the commission felt it necessary to address all of the parks under their charge.
Okay.
So we added it to the list for completeness.
Okay, thank you. So I have a bunch of comments that
Please.
Nobody's going to be happy about, but I'm going to say them anyway. I appreciate us being pet friendly. I've had dogs for a total of 30-some years, except this really disturbs me. It seems like we're no longer going to be kid friendly. We're going to allow the parks to be taken over by dogs. It says owner handlers should be required, not must be, should be required to keep the dogs on a non-retractable leash at all times with a maximum leash length of 6 feet. So picture a person walking with 3 dogs on a 6-foot, I'm 6 foot. So you have 3 dogs 6 foot away from you walking through 7th Avenue Park that has only two little paths on each side through the grass. Well, where are the kids supposed to play? I mean, that picture is disturbing to me. And the number 7, dogs should be permitted throughout the listed parks and not be required to remain on the park pathways. Where's the place for the kids? I mean, parks are for kids. I love dogs. I own dogs. I have dogs, but I have 3 kids that love playing in the parks, and I mean, it just appalls me to think that we are going to allow dogs off the pathways. We're going to allow people to have 3 dogs on 6-foot length leashes walking through where kids are supposed to be kicking balls and running around. I'm sorry. So I don't think that number 7 should be done at all. I think they should be, if you want to walk your dog through a park that has a pathway that leads from one end to the other, which is like for Grundy Park. I know it goes through a couple of street things and has a pathway from one street to the other. That's perfectly fine. I know we have it at City Park where we walk the dogs through it. That's perfectly fine. But to have 14 parks where the dogs are going to be able to run around even on 6-foot leashes, I don't approve of. I don't think it's right.
Other comments?
Did you want to go next, Michael?
You can go.
Okay.
Or Davis?
So as a Park and Rec Commissioner, the discussion regarding dogs in parks has been a discussion for many, many years. And, a lot of owners have come forward wanting a place to bring their dogs. A number of the cities, all on the peninsula, now allow dogs. A number of facilities now allow dogs. I mean, I travel a lot, and I'm in the airports and I'm seeing dogs. I see dogs at Tanforan. They're around, and it's becoming more and more acceptable. It's also more about having responsible owners. The other thing about this ordinance is it puts in place some guidelines, because without it, they're still bringing the dogs to the park. It's very difficult to actually police having a dog in a park, but only on the pathway. So I think that was a discussion that the commission had, was that if you're going to allow the dog in the park, let's make him be responsible. And the other option, the other point about Councilmember O'Connell is the 6-foot length on the leash is a standard length of the leash. So if I went down to Walgreens right now and bought a leash for my dog, it's a 6-foot length. It's pretty typical. And I think the report in the staff from the police department was there weren't very many incidents. I think the bigger incidents are owners being in parks that aren't allowed, or being in any location allowed, whether it's walking down the street in my own neighborhood and leaving their dog residue behind. I think we just need to encourage responsible dog owners and allow dogs in parks.
Anything from Marty or Michael?
I would like to hear from Michael, being on the Planning Commission. I'm sorry, from our Park and Rec Commission. But I have a comment.
Sure.
Well, I had my own concerns initially because like Irene, I felt that the parks really were for children and not dogs. But I think we have to commend dog owners in the city for having policed themselves. And I've seen comments on Nextdoor where they're calling each other out and they're making sure that they're responsible. And I mean, any concerns I had, I think were I was proven that those concerns weren't valid, because we really haven't seen any concerns. We haven't had anybody bitten, and hasn't really been any contention. Another concern I had early on was that by changing the law to say that they had to be on leashes and certain things, it would create some expectation that we would somehow be able to enforce that. And I don't think we've really had an issue where we've had to make a concerted effort to add more enforcement, and there weren't any complaints even during the test period. So overall, I think it was a successful test. I think the dog owners have proven that they are responsible, and being that we haven't had any concerns, I really don't have any new concerns in terms of allowing the dogs in the parks.
Marty?
So I'm sensitive to Councilwoman O'Connell's comments I have a 5-year-old. I remember being very cautious at any time with my son, anywhere where there's a dog. It could be like that. I'm a little surprised it went this far. But I understand that we had some good results from our temporary policy. I'm interested in how the 3 dogs, I mean, I can imagine 3 little dogs could be under control, but 3 large dogs, again, depending on the owner. But I recall hearing of one instance not too long ago about a dog owner not really complying with just only one time. So I don't think I'm going to get a dog at some point. My son's only 5, so it's probably another year because I don't want to be walking him all the time by myself. So the idea of a non-retractable leash, I mean, they may make them, but I see, everybody with the other leashes. But and my question for staff would be, what's the violation? How when that does occur, how does that work? When somebody calls in, hey, there's 4 dogs, somebody's walking or with them through the park, that takes a phone call and police officer comes out, and what kind of the steps are, what the cost of that ticket, or is it full, I'm guessing, discretion from the officer to figure out what the story is. You get a verbal warning the first time. But I can imagine if 8 different dog owners decided that they wanted to walk in the park at one of the Walnut or otherwise, they could kind of take over part of the park. Maybe not the responsible people that show up to the meetings and that have been very good about their dogs and cleaning up after other dogs, but that is a concern of mine. I know if there might be other people too where I probably wouldn't go there that day if I saw too many dogs running around. My son probably wants to get over there. So I'm just kind of sensitive about that, and there's no limit on how many people could have dogs in the park. They all could have 3. But I'm in favor of the overall process that we're going through to allow the dogs in the park. I'm just not 100% convinced that free reign through the park on a leash is a really controllable situation for the non-responsible dog owners. So that's my comments for now.
So, Mr. Medina had questions in regards to citations or the process of that, or how that would be perceived to be done at this time. I know the ordinance isn't here.
Can I make a comment about that, though, as well?
Okay. Hold on. So, you spoke, and you haven't had an opportunity. So, yes, let us hear from the chief first to answer the councilman's question.
Good evening. A brief summary of how a call for service such as that works. We don't get a lot, and I did do a little research prior to this evening to kind of determine how often we're called for these types of things, and it's very, very infrequent. A violation of this code is a violation of the municipal code section, so we would treat it like we would treat any of the other municipal code section, which gives us 2 options. One is to treat it as a citation, an infraction, where somebody would receive a citation and they would basically go to traffic court, similar to any other type of infraction. The other option is the municipal code does allow for these code violations to be prosecuted as misdemeanors, and that would involve a discussion with the city attorney for the city to actually prosecute that. It would not go through the district attorney's office like a normal misdemeanor crime would. The practical aspect of it, as far as somebody called about, or somebody mentioned about when the police officers get called and go out there, yes, we do try to resolve these issues at the lowest level. more often than not, if it's a call that involves someone who's not in immediate danger, it'll take a few minutes to get out there, and more often than not, we find that the alleged infraction is no longer occurring, and an infraction at this level has to be committed in an officer's presence for him or her to take any action. So there are some challenges with enforcement, but we did participate in the pilot program and learned a lot from that, and continuously check the parks that we've been asked to check. So so far it's worked well.
Okay. Karen, you want us to speak, please?
My name is Karen Cromosini, and I would like to talk about this issue. Thank you for all your help, what you did, that we can take the dogs finally into the parks and that. But like Irene says, the parks are there for the children. The parks are there for families, and to dog owners they are family, and they really would like to take them there. I understand that there are some dog owners that do not watch their dog and let them misbehave and everything, but there are some people that do have their dog under control, and they would like to take them everywhere. I take mine also to Tamfaran and places, because she is for me everything. Yeah, I have my children and my grandchildren. They come and visit me with the dog. Yeah, so to me it is family. Yeah, and I have a real good dog. She listens very well, and she does not bother people or other dogs. So I really would like to keep it up. And there are always people who don't pick up after the dog. It makes me angry. And there are also people who don't watch their children and let them run around loose and do other things. So it's, it happens. It's the people themselves who take responsibility of their children or of other, or of their pets. So for me, I love my dog, and I would like to take him everywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. So, Laura, you have...
I just wanted to make an additional comment. Thank you to the chief for explaining some of the comments or questions that you had, Councilmember Medina. But I wanted to say that as a resident, as a softball coach, as a baseball coach, as a basketball coach, I've spent many hours in San Bruno Park and other parks in San Bruno, and I will tell you that there have always been dogs, but there are responsible dog owners. And I am definitely concerned about safety, and I think that's why it's taken the commission this many years to get to this point, because safety is definitely number one. Item 6 in the recommendation indicates that dogs are not restricted from entering any type of children's play area. But I also think as parents, as dog owners, we also do the same thing. If we feel that a dog's aggressive, we feel a dog should be around children, people are not afraid to speak up, and owners are not afraid to move their dogs. But I've seen a lot of dogs in the parks, and it's impossible for the police to enforce it. Because like he said, you make a phone call, they show up, well, that was 30 minutes ago, that was 20 minutes ago, that was an hour ago, and they're no longer there. We need to make sure that we have responsible dog owners, that they follow a policy. If there's wording in the recommendation that we want to change, handlers are required to keep the dogs on a non-retractable leash. If you feel that 3 dogs is maybe too much, does it make a big difference to change it to 2 dogs? I mean, I'd like to see if there's any additional comments or changes to that, but I get what the comments are, but I think safety has been a concern, and like you said, there hasn't been the incidents that support the concerns.
I was just saying, personally, I think it should be, shall be, should be, not must. Must be, not should be. I also had the question maybe to staff, but you two were on the body, was just the 3 versus 2. 3 can get. I thought it was 3. Oh, okay. So I was trying to understand too the 2 between the 3. We talked about the park pathway. I think some of the other comments Irina had was, again, 6-foot leash is still a long way for the dog to take over a park. If there were 3 dogs going through and it was a small park, there is no limitation on how many dogs can be in a park, but I don't know how you can't really regulate that, and so. But yes, I do believe it should be must be. I'm just questioning on the 2 versus 3.
Mr. Mayor, I believe that came up from the rule that allows someone to own 3 dogs in a household. The notion that any household could have 3 dogs, but that was the limit. And so I think what the commission was thinking was if 3 dogs lived in a household, the family could take, or somebody could take all 3 of them for a walk.
Anything? Other comments from council?
I was only going to comment that I believe the language that's in here is really based on the recommendation coming from the commission, so it's not really intended to be the legalese that would ultimately be in the ordinance.
You're correct. We're here to give recommendation and comments to staff on what to do or to bring back an ordinance if we wish. I did have a question on the 2 versus 3, but I know we don't have specific, is it a law or what have you, so if you know it, you do. I wouldn't expect you have to know that.
Yeah, I think I've lost track of the number of dogs we have. We're having a discussion about that here, as you can see, and I think we're fairly convinced that there is some sort of limit. We think it's 3. I don't happen to know that, but I'll rely on these folks. I think that's really, though, a separate issue. And just because you're allowed 3 dogs or allowed 10 dogs in a household doesn't necessarily mean that you should be allowed to walk that many dogs at the same time in a park for the other reasons that council members may have stated. And if you do want an ordinance brought back, we can certainly do that. Somebody did have a question about how long would it take. I'll just answer that now if you don't mind. So it requires 2 readings. So it could come back possibly at the next city council meeting, although we don't know what that agenda looks like. But then after the second reading at the second city council meeting, the ordinance would not go into effect for 30 days. So there's a 30 days before it would go into effect. So realistically, you're looking at probably another couple of months before that it would go into effect.
Thank you. Yes, Karen.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may add, that 30-day sort of waiting implementation period will be particularly helpful to the Parks Division. We'll have to refabricate all the signs for the parks that will now allow dogs, and we've got that as a consideration under the fiscal impact. And we've started working on that language and have had some discussions with the city attorney as well.
Okay, council, we've had some discussion, and what's the direction of the council as well as to staff? Marty?
And these dogs need to all be licensed, right? Is that right?
That is a requirement through San Mateo County.
Okay.
Direction from council, please.
With that, I would recommend that we accept the Park and Rec Commission's recommendations and move forward on changing the ordinance.
So do we want to make any modifications to like must be, not should be, or?
I think we could leave it to the city attorney to make the appropriate word choices.
So normally, what I would recommend for an ordinance like this is that if there's a requirement, it should be a requirement. Otherwise, it certainly can't be enforced at all. So I would recommend that the 3 leash dogs, the non-retractable leash with a maximum length of 6 feet, responsible for promptly cleaning up, that those items be mandatory, and then we'll come up with appropriate wording for the other items which are permissive. But I think if that's the direction of the city council, we can make the other requirements mandatory.
Is there anything else to give direction to the attorney? And we'll see if any. Marty, what would you like to do?
We have a first and a second?
We're just having this direction to staff.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm in favor of this, of having the dogs in the park. I just wanted to have a better understanding. I believe we've shown, our dog owners have shown that they can be responsible, and those that are not, they'll suffer the consequences.
Yes, City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, I believe that you have a motion on the floor from Councilmember Salazar. And yes, this item does envision direction to staff, but we would appreciate a motion or an actual vote as well that includes your direction.
We can do that.
Okay. In
Mr.
that
Salazar, are
case,
you
I
good with
will
making
make-
that a motion?
I will make a motion to accept the recommendations as stated in the staff report from the Park and Rec Commission to bring back an ordinance.
And just so we're clear, is that with mandatory language in numbers 3, 4, and 5, and 6?
And wherever else necessary.
Okay, I understood.
Is there a second?
I second.
It's been a motion made to second to go move this forward and bring back an ordinance. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
4-1. Please bring back the ordinance.